For tonight's homework, students are going to work on creating multiplication or number of copies of a mixed number. So one of the things we talked about in class, how a mixed number is made up of two parts. It has a whole number and a fraction. So when we want to represent that, we have to represent both parts. And when we do that visually, it's quite easy to see. So this is something we practice in class, a tape diagram. So students want to recognize that we need 3 units, or in this case, 3 copies. We've been talking in class about how that's 3 pieces of tape. So this represents my 3 units. Then in each piece of tape I want to show 5 and 1/12. So all I'm simply going to do is break each box into 5 whole and call the smaller portion 1/12. This allows students to see the visual division or 2 parts of the whole number and the fraction in the mixed number. So students here can then see 5 and 1/12 with 3 copies. So the multiplication expression to match the tape diagram would be the number of times that the student sees the pieces of tape and then what mixed number they see repeated. So in this case, the mixed number that they see repeated is 5 and 1/12, and the number of copies they see would be 3. So once students have figured out that there are 3 copies, they're going to write the number of times they see it. So this 3 represents that we see it 1, 2, 3 times, that's here, and then the fraction is the length of each tape diagram. For the next one, they're going to show how that represents as a distributive property. So if you look at example A, this part looks just like the part we did above. The distributive property shows that we have to break 6 4/5 into its 2 parts, its whole number and its fraction. This part is showing the 3 distributed. So here you see 3 times 4, which is showing what happened on the first arrow. The next is 3 times 4/5. You can see that we have to also do this. This is what's represented above visually. We're showing 3 copies of 6 4/5, so we need 3 copies of each. They solved 18 from 3 times 6, and then they got 12/5 for 3 times 4/5. Students can think about this as the number of copies times the numerator to get the fraction. The step they took to get from here to here is the number bond. They said 12/5, how many whole are there? So they said they're thinking 5/5 is equal to 1 whole. So if 5/5 is equal to 1 whole, they have 5/5, that's 1 whole, 10/5, that's 2 whole. So 10/5 would equal 2 whole, and then 12, if I use 10, I have 2/5 left. So that's how they're getting the 2 and 2/5. They took out 2 whole, and then they had 2/5 remaining. The final step is to add the 2 whole numbers together and then attach the fraction. So I'm going to show students how to do C. B they should be able to do, and D they should be able to do. So the first thing is they want to show the number of copies, 6, times the mixed number as an addition model. So the whole number plus the fraction. So what would the whole number plus the fraction be? It should be 2 whole and 3/5. The next step is to distribute the 6 times the whole number and 6 times the fraction. So they're going to create 2 brackets, parentheses, and do the first arrow, 6 times 2. Then the second arrow, 6 times 3/5. Underneath, they're going to solve that. So 6 times 2 plus 6 times 3/5. 6 times 3 is 18/5. I like students to show the work with the number bond, so I'm going to show that here. I'm thinking about 5/5 makes 1 whole. So how many copies of 5 do I have? Well, if I do 15/5, that would be 3 whole. And then 18 subtract 15 leaves me with 3/5. So now I'm going to add up my whole numbers. 12 plus 3, 15. And then I'm going to include my fraction and 3/5. Students should be able to follow those steps on B and D. E and F are exactly the same, so we want students to follow that same procedure. When students get down to 3 and 4, they're going to be getting real-world situations where this distributive property with multiplication and mixed numbers occurs. So in this one, we see Sarah's street is 2 3/10 miles long. She ran the length of the street 6 times. How far did she run? One of the things I would encourage students to do also, along with the multiplication or the math model, is to think about a visual model. So like if I thought about how far this girl's running, I could say, well, the first time she did it, her first trip, she covered 2 3/10 mile. Her second time, she did the same, 2 3/10 mile. The third time. So students are able to realize that they're repeatedly adding or they're counting the same distance multiple times. It's important for students to see that these are real situations that we can drop. So what students are going to realize is after they do this, they're going to realize that we see her repeating the same fraction, and we see it repeated 6 times. So the number model would be 6 and 2 times 2 3/10. When students do 6 times 2 3/10, remember you have to distribute the 6 to the 2 because she ran 2 miles each time, and then she also ran 3/10 each of the 6 times 2.